Tony again. I just wanted to add something I neglected to mention in the previous video, and that is that when it comes to the prohibition of suicide, when it comes to the prohibition of tobacco as a possibility, there's a pretty upsetting story that I have to tell about a friend who actually began smoking when he was a child so that he could literally get cancer and die. I'm not making this up. I know someone who began smoking and did so to commit suicide. And he's smoking to this day, and he hasn't kicked the habit. So I'll just use this time to show, again, as you see here, 443,000 people a year or more die because of cigarette use. They have failed to outlaw cigarettes. They claim political reasons. It's a great reason. Of course, I'm being sarcastic. Yeah, it's funny that they're simultaneously prohibiting suicide and telling you that you're crazy if you try to, gaslighting you. Basically, the government is gaslighting you, telling you that you're crazy if you try to commit suicide because it's been prohibited via psychiatry, even though they haven't outright outlawed it, which, by the way, even prohibiting and punishing someone, which is what the healthcare industry is doing, is what the state is doing. When someone tries to commit suicide, that's what the healthcare industry is basically doing, punishing as if it was a crime. And that is theocracy. That is theocratic. Okay, because they're putting Christian moral values onto everyone, regardless of how they identify, whether they identify as Christian or not. And that's completely fine. That's completely legal. Yet you can go to a corner store and buy a pack of cigarettes and legally kill yourself and generate income, generate jobs for people in the healthcare industry like that. It's a simple decision. How to spend your money. Same with alcohol, really. Same with firearms. I also know somebody in my extended family who attempted to commit suicide by a gun. When I say extended, I mean extreme extended, not in my direct lineage. So if you're wondering about mental health and whether it runs in my family, it does not. In fact, my family is using the fraud of mental health as an excuse, as a false rationalization to abuse and imprison me, and psychiatrically abuse me, of course. So they've lied about, when I say they, I don't mean just my family, I mean the mental health system in general. Have lied about suicidality in me, lied about homicidality in me. Okay, the reality is that psychiatric law is literally one factor of it is that it's literally Jim Crow law. It's a new Jim Crow law. And that doesn't just apply to to blacks, to African Americans. It applies to everyone. It's almost a filicidal Jim Crow law, or a gerontocratic and theocratic Jim Crow law. Okay? Because the government, or the state rather, has all these double standards. Double standard of you can't kill yourself, yet you can kill yourself if it's making us profit. You see how contradictory and hypocritical capitalism is in that sense, where the politicians won't upset revenue streams that are creating however many millions and billions of dollars that tobacco is generating for the U.S. economy. You know what I mean? We're not even getting into the economics of this and what industries the U.S. is in the lead of and what they're not. You know, but us, like many other countries, are competing to be the most suicidal, sanctioned, state-sanctioned suicidally. That's what's really happening. People don't really seem to talk about the fact that the growth industries are making money off of suffering, and that and murder, basically, and suicide, and basically that doing so is fraudulent. It's using the Hegelian, or applying the Hegelian dialectic of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, or problem, action, and solution. That is, corporations and governments and psychiatry are creating problems which don't exist before they as authorities present them, and then they're setting the victim up as the antithesis, or the antagonist, or the problem in this narrative, and then they're setting themselves up as the thesis, because the thesis is actually the bad part in this scenario, because, for example, cigarettes are the thesis. It's a product. And then they're setting themselves up as the heroes because we're saving you from tobacco usage, or we're saving people from losing jobs because they're creating jobs out of creating the problem, which is the thesis, which is the product. You see what I'm saying? You create cigarettes, and you've got people killing themselves willfully, you know, and then that creates jobs for the healthcare industry where there weren't before. You know, it's not a few people when it's 443,000 a year at the very least. And I'm sure during the pandemic that number has grew exponentially, because loneliness has grew exponentially. Therefore, risk for suicide has grown exponentially. That's just an idea. I will fact check that. So, I don't know, it's just an interesting thing to think about it. Like I said, I know someone who started smoking purposely to commit suicide. It wasn't because it was cool. It wasn't because there was peer pressure. It was for that intent solely. So this, you know, hits home for me very much. And the same thing with the firearms. Like I was saying, someone who attempted suicide with a firearm and survived, only to be in a diminished capacity afterwards. Yeah, like I said, in the state is allowed to be violent. They're allowed to do all these things. They're allowed to advertise your own suicide to you and also give it to you and have you pay for it. And then you don't have the voluntary choice as to whether or not to take deadly poison drugs, take chemical warfare agents, when it's basically, through psychiatry, the government is at civil war with you or whoever they're forcing these drugs on, these drug poisons on. Okay. That's the literal reality of this. Okay. They're going to tell you it's okay to die, it's okay to commit suicide as long as you do it through the proper channels that make us money. You see what I'm saying? And that's what all these politicians that with no backbone that won't outlaw cigarettes are telling you. Okay. It's okay for your children to be suicidal as long as these corporations do it through the proper channels, but yet we're going to torture and murder your child if that child tries to commit suicide through improper channels. That's the contradiction. That's the hypocrisy. Okay, this has been Tony. Again, you can contact me at telepathrefuge@gmail.com. I'll have more videos, more updates to come soon. Okay, goodbye.